public awareness and public education initiatives. Some more questions. Are there any restrictions on data usage for data that UNICEF Jamaica provides? And also, is there are you funneling any non-personified data from programs like the mental health chatline to help inform other initiatives?
Okay, so if I take it from the top, we have a when you join your report, we ask you 3 questions. We ask you your age, your gender, and your parish. We don't ask your name or any personal identifying information. Obviously, you might be participating via WhatsApp, for instance. Your responses that we receive from you on our platform, we don't see your WhatsApp phone number, your profile, or any information like that. For the mental health chatline, for instance, the counselors use a management platform, another piece of software, open source software called CasePro, and that again anonymizes the data. In some cases, we may ask, supposing that we thought you were in need of an immediate intervention, we might request your name, your contact information, and location so that you can be reached out to for immediate support, such as if you are having, you are feeling suicidal. But other than that, we definitely would not, and everything has to be done via consent, of course. So any research that we do, hypothetically speaking, if in responding to a poll, you'd stated your name, we would obviously have to remove your name from that response before we share the information with the partner. Sometimes, we might say, for instance, if we have an initiative where we want to share like user-generated content and people to submit a video, for instance, then we would request your name and information because we'd also have to get you to sign a consent form as well. But for the most part, we operate anonymously. Does that answer the question?
Yes, but in part, I'm also interested in whether not just if the data is non-personified, but if there are general reports being done based on issues that persons present with from the mental chat line. So okay, in terms of being able to say, a lot of persons are dealing with this particular mental issue at this point in time, maybe we need to have some programs geared towards probably depression or suicide at a certain time, whether those go up or down at a certain time of the year and so forth.
Very good question. So we haven't launched the chat line yet, but of course we do intend to use the data that we gather. So we will be monitoring how many of those cases are of a particular nature, say for instance, depression, say for instance, substance abuse. And that we would definitely be reporting that back to the Ministry of Health, because then there should, obviously we would want as an organization to ensure that interventions are put in place. And as an aside, UNICEF Jamaica is part of a global pilot project that UNICEF has on mental health. So we'll be doing a lot of advocacy about on mental health. And as part of that, that's to call for improved services for young people, not just via the health ministry, but across the board. So for instance, we also support the Ministry of Education to provide teletherapy via guidance counselors, because obviously during the pandemic when schools closed, young people who would have had face-to-face appointments with their guidance counselors who no longer could, it was important that their guidance counselors had phone credit, had the means to continue those appointments, albeit via telephony rather than face-to-face.
Okay, hopefully you're not hearing any noise in my background. Thank you, Ross. Yes, that definitely answers, and we're glad to hear about those. We have a question in the chat from Matthew Norton. Would you want to talk about persons that might be responding to questions for the mental health line?
Okay, sure. So we have a very committed group of counselors who are recruited via JAMPSAC, as I mentioned before, which is the National Organization for Psychologists. So these are experienced counselors. They come from a wide range. So for instance, some are currently, one of our members works on the Ministry of Health's National Mental Health Helpline, which is 1-888 New Life. One person is a probation officer, one person is a police inspector, but these are all people with professional counseling experience. And as I mentioned earlier, our second cohort are going to be master's students from the psychology program at the University of the West Indies, Mona. So it is very important to state that if you're messaging us, you're not being replied to by, say, for instance, a person such as myself, who, yes, understands how to use the platform, but has no experience in offering counseling. And I need to add as well is that we do not bill ourselves, and we will not be promoting ourselves as a medical intervention. We do not provide treatment, diagnosis. What we will be is a first line response. Many
So
young people,
linkage.
right. So many young people are, first of all, unable to access mental health services, whether that be with their location or for economic factors. And approximately 33% of appointments at clinics, public clinics, aren't being kept. So persons don't turn up, which can be for a variety of reasons. That could be stigma, for instance. Unfortunately, stigma does remain about mental health. And so what we hope is that by providing a service that's trustworthy, it's anonymous with trained counselors, and that's easy to access via mobile, that should hopefully be a first way for someone to access support. And maybe at a later date, when it's appropriate to them, they would then be able to go and seek perhaps face-to-face counseling.
Awesome. Matthew, you're good with that, right?
Yes, thank you, Ross.
Awesome.
Due to the interest of time, I think we should move on to the next speaker. So Latifa, you can continue.
Thank you, Shane. So thank you again, Ross. So we will now move to our demo of the Open Data Portal. So we've just looked at the data-driven initiatives that the UNICEF Jamaica has implemented and is in the process of implementing, which make use of open data and also help to provide us with new open data, particularly for the Ministry of Health. And now we'll look at the Jamaican Open Data Portal that was established some years ago. So, we have the CEO of Farm Credibly to take us through this demo, Varun Baker. Varun is CEO of Farm Credibly, which provides access to loans for unbanked farmers in Jamaica without requiring them to fill out the same amount, without requiring them to fill out any paperwork. So definitely a huge benefit when you compare that to approaching the bank or a small loan financing facility. He has over 15 years of experience in enterprise level industry solutions and in business communications, as well as operational management with focus on software engineering. He's also experienced in designing web services and website architectures based on open standards. And he is also one of the key developers of the Open Data Portal, as well as having a lot of responsibility for its launch, and being involved in lobbying efforts for more open data initiatives in our local space. He's definitely one of the persons who championed this commemoration event. So I'll now turn over to Varun.
Great. All right. Thanks so much. I'm really thrilled to be here. So thanks so much also for inviting me. I really enjoyed the presentations and the information shared so far today. So I'm happy to jump into this demo. One sec, let me get my screen shared here.
Okay, so while Varun is sharing, just a reminder to anyone, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat or send me a direct message and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. Okay, good to go.
Yep, all right, everyone's seeing the first slide, right?
Yes, we're seeing.
All right, great. So yeah, so like I said, you know, or maybe I should reintroduce myself. My name is Varun Baker. I'm the CEO of Farm Credibly. We're an agri-tech company that's focused on improving access to finance in agriculture. So while we started out aiming to really revolutionize things and not require farmers to fill out any paperwork, things have moved ahead, and currently we're actually championing a platform that essentially allows for crowdfunding. So people, wherever they are in the world, can contribute and essentially fund a farm here in Jamaica. We're seeing really good success with that. But essentially, this company is very much data driven. And you know, some of the backstory beyond this actually starts with the open data portal. So let's go straight into it. So, you know, when we talk about data and the data portal, before I demo it to you, I'd like to actually just think through what we think about when we say data. And the most important takeaway I'd like us to think through is that data really helps us to tell our story. And that's our story as Jamaicans. And some interesting kind of data points that I'd like to bring to the table are one that fuels my company's mission every day, which is that 90% of farmers cannot access credit. They can't walk into a bank and expect to get a loan to expand their farm. Yet still, you know, it's super easy to go and get a loan to import a Japanese car. But even more interesting than that, I'd say, is that, you know, more persons are murdered in Jamaica than die from COVID. And throughout that's per year, right? Especially if you look at the last 2 years. It's really remarkable the amount of kind of national, I suppose, coordination that's happened around the issue of COVID, which is a serious threat to human and public health and life. But based on the statistics, it's not quite as severe as our problems involving guns and murders. But even more interestingly, I would say that more people actually die from food than from gunshots, and that's really remarkable, right? This is not something unique to Jamaica, actually. Throughout the Caribbean and in the region, over 83% of persons die from non-communicable diseases. So these are lifestyle diseases, and diet is a huge factor in that. So I just want to, I just mentioned these things to kind of frame how we think about data as more of a storytelling tool. And, you know, I'd like to bring us back to when we first launched this open data portal in 2016. It was done thanks to the support of the World Bank, but also other stakeholders that were a part of this. So actually a group from Code for Africa, individual team members from South Africa came and helped us launch this portal, helped us to train persons within the government in how to update data. But what they brought was actually a background in data journalism. So they were very well versed at using stories and using data to communicate really interesting and sometimes really important issues that they were facing. And it really inspired us a lot. So I'm super excited to be here and see so many others kind of at the table and engaged and ready to really continue pushing this initiative forward. It's been great, and it's all been really thanks to the work of the Open Data Committee primarily, who's come together and represent several stakeholders from within government who all want to see more open data, right? So this, along with our progress around the open data, the OGP initiative that Mr. Lumsden spoke on earlier, is really exciting. So I will pause my slides and come back to them just so that I can give you guys a walkthrough. But are there any other questions, that I can address before I do that? What does open mean when we talk about open data? Just let me know. Otherwise, I'll.
Before you start, I should give a disclaimer because of the conversation that is happening in the community chat. So the demo that Vaughn is going to show is a demo of the open data portal that will be upgraded. It hasn't been upgraded yet, and we still need to update the data. So you may see outdated data and things that we plan to upgrade. So this is not necessarily the new version that will be released during this OGP process. So with that said, Paran, you can continue.
Yeah, thanks so much, Shane. I think that's a really important point. What we're seeing, what I'll be demoing now is really mainly the result of the work we did in 2016. Obviously, a lot of time has transpired since then. But that's also the reason I'm so excited today to be here, because we are finally kind of getting the stakeholders together who can help to drive this forward and have us, realize much more, I suppose, timely and relevant data sets on the portal. So it's been an amazing start. We got out the gates the first in the Caribbean. I think that's commendable. But there's still a lot of work to do to take this to where we want to see it, but we're certainly on the right path. And, I think that's what's most important. So yeah, let me actually talk through a couple of the features as well before I go into this. So the portal is itself built on a distribution called DCAN, which itself is based on something called Drupal for all the super technical persons here who are interested in that kind of stuff. But the main features I'd like to highlight are, one, it supports uploading and hosting data sets, which we'll definitely take a look at. And then specific resources within these data sets may be JSON files or even PDFs, etc. Then it supports some basic visualizations that allow us to preview the data, actually view it in different formats like in graphs and even on a map. Of course, you can also search the various data sets. Harvesting data is super exciting. Earlier, we mentioned that a long-term vision here is to see this throughout the Caribbean. And I believe it was Gary who said, this might become a CARICOM effort one day. And I really do want to say that most of the effort is actually on the ground at the agencies who produce this data. And if this does become a regional effort, it would be as simple as spinning up another portal that harvests data from many individual national portals across the Caribbean, and then making everything available through this central point. So it's not a lot of work. The main work is actually in getting each country to the point where they can update data sets that are collected by government agencies and that we decide should be made available to the public. Another great feature is that data stories can happen. I'll show you a couple that, again, were published way back in 2016 or 17, which are essentially blog posts or articles that reference data. So going back to the idea of data journalism that I spoke of earlier. Of course, things can be grouped together and organized in structured ways on the platform. And the platform has very good multilingual support and support for internationalization. So that's also great for the region, right? We speak many languages in this region. And then there are different workflows that can be enabled. Let's say you don't want to automatically make a data set available. You may have a vetting process or someone who needs to review things before they're actually published. All of this is possible through DCAN. So let me just go back and actually click on, are you guys seeing the homepage of the Open Data Portal?
Yes.
Right now? Yeah, okay, great. So this is the homepage. I will just scroll down slowly so you guys have a sense of it, but I'll go ahead and click through so that you can see the main areas on the site that I'd like to highlight right now. So one of them we've spoke of a few times is just the categories of data. So there's everything from data that has to do with agriculture to specific things to the economy or finance or health. Obviously, as the Jamaican public, we can decide that, you know, education is super important and we'd like more visibility in terms of what is happening. So publishing data through the Open Data Portal helps us to really drive into those kind of details, right? Whether it's who's enrolled in each parish or what the textbook prices are looking like. So these are the categories. I will get into the individual data sets, but before I do, since I mentioned groupings before, things are grouped on the portal based on the government agency that produces the data and was responsible for publishing it. I will say that a lot of my time and work in launching this initiative or helping the data sets to get kind of collated and put together for this was to, one, make sure that things were published in an open format, and two, what's called kind of data wrangling, which is just cleaning up data to make sure that it's more usable. Very often data sets or data may not be fully clean, or it may have, you know, a lot of variations in it, or maybe even typos that, as a programmer, which is my background, will be very much a headache if we do have that type of data to work with. So I just spent a lot of time putting things into CSV, which is an open format, and some data was still published as PDFs, etc. But as much as possible, I tried to get things in a nice, open, accessible format for us. So so I'm just scrolling through so you can see all the very progressive agencies that did contribute to this initiative. And the idea is we want more recent data from all these agencies, but we'd also like, and ministries, but we'd also like more participation, right? We know that there is more information out there that will be beneficial to the public. So a lot of times it's just about doing the groundwork of reaching out and putting this together, and so that's why I'm happy that we are coming together in this spirit. All right, so I've highlighted all of the great agencies that have done this. We went through the various topics. Let's take a look at some of the actual data. So some of my favorite data came from the Planning Institute of Jamaica. The reason it's some of my favorite is because it included geographical data, or it also included geodata, meaning that we can also preview these things on the platform itself, which I'll show you right now. These shape files are an example of a closed format. So in order to open shape files, you need ArcGIS or a proprietary piece of software. And when we talk about government, it's important to understand or appreciate that by saving information, government information, or information that's important to Jamaica and Jamaicans in a closed format or a proprietary format, we are essentially enforcing licensing fees on future generations or future governments, or next year, in order to access this, will depend on having a copy of ArcGIS. So it's another big benefit of also saving information in open formats, so that we have the power to do what we want with it in the future. So those are shape files. If I click on one of these shape files, there's no way to preview it or anything here. I'll have to download the file, which is fine, I can do, but I'll also have to have ArcGIS. So I remember going through this and actually creating what's called GeoJSON for all the, again, technical people here. This GeoJSON format means that one, well, we can also see a tabular grid view of this. This is available for all data published as CSV. Same thing goes for the graphs. So we can plot example graphs to kind of, for the most part, get a sense of what information there is and decide if we want to download it, if it has what we're looking for. Typically, if we're really diving into visualizing our data, we would use, some dedicated libraries or software to do that. But having it on the portal is nice because you can also embed it on a separate website where, for example, let's say you want to show a map. So going back to the grid, as you can see here, I'm just looking at the first 1 to 100 rows of data. Each one of these shapes are provided through that GeoJSON column I mentioned. And then these are all the other kind of data points in that row. So when we talk about data being accessible, it also has to be, that speaks to how immediately usable it is by someone in your own organization. So there are a lot of kind of details here that are a little bit cryptic, if you're not familiar with the data set. And so another piece of work in providing open data is in one, providing metadata, so information about this, but also making sure that things are immediately useful for persons, right? So something like a PAR code stands for parish code. It would be more self-explanatory if we wrote out the full wording, parish code, so we know what we're looking at. But even so, this coding or parish 02 is not useful for people in the public sphere as much as it is for people perhaps within government who are using this data set, right? And have this system of coding each parish maybe 1 to 14 or maybe 1 to 15 soon enough, right? So anyway, this is what that looks like. This is what records 1 to 100 look like. If I look at 100 to 200, we include Westmoreland, and I can keep kind of previewing things this way. So let's say 400 to 450 or 499. Yeah. All right. So hopefully this gives some idea of things. For all the programmers out there, the nice thing is also that things are available by API. So if I click on this link, you'll see essentially the JSON result that's returned, which basically spits out everything that this data set has in it. So that would be all 800 plus rows. And yeah, are there any questions on this, or having viewed the some of this data and some of the capabilities so far? Let me know. You can always stop me. The last thing I want to touch on here is actually around data stories. So I mentioned them earlier, and we prepared all of these stories. The one I'd probably like to share here, I'm sure everyone remembers when chikungunya swept over the country, but how many of us actually had a visualization of what that looks like, right? So this bell curve is kind of the typical spread of incidents when there are these outbreaks, and we'll have, there's one for each parish, for example, which, we can see St. Andrew and Westmoreland. But the cool thing here is I was able to produce a heat map that shows actually how chikungunya spread. That would be east to west. So there was an outbreak in Kingston, and then it immediately affected Montego Bay and other more well-populated or densely populated parts of the island. So all of this is possible directly through the platform itself. And as O'Shane said earlier, this is actually an earlier version of the platform. It has been, the technology behind this has been updated since, and we're looking forward to bringing all of this forward so that we have even more features and more to show here. So yeah, so thanks. Let me know again if there are any questions. Otherwise, I have a couple more slides that I'll go through before handing back over the mic.
Okay, I do have a couple questions. Thank you very
Sure.
much for showing the data API, because as a developer, that is one of the question, of course, most of the community members has been asking, as well as myself. So when I first looked at the data portal, it was very difficult for me to find that data API, and then I realized that it's not necessarily well documented. So going forward, that's, well, this is more like a statement, then I'll get into the question. So going forward, what I definitely think we should do is help document how you can use the API, even though these can give examples. I think having it on the site, or you can just manipulate the query string to get certain results than sending them to a website, another website to get something else. That's something I think we should take on as a part of the whole data committee. In terms of the question now, I haven't done those search, but what other formats does the API come to? Is it just JSON, or there is a possibility of like GraphQL? And of course, this is a technical question, so I do apologize about it.
Sure. So, no, good question. I would say, in my experience, it mainly returns data in JSON format. GraphQL, etc., really took on a lot more popularity after we launched this. So I'm not sure if the new version of DCAN actually supports other data formats or returns other data formats. But I'll definitely look into that. To speak to your first point, I certainly agree with the idea of documenting how to use the API. And if it's something the committee wants to take on, I would certainly recommend publishing this as a story as a data story on the portal itself, so that, like you said, O'Shane, people don't have to go anywhere else to figure out how to use this thing. They can stay right on the Jamaican Open Data Portal and learn and probably go through an example of how to query data, access it, and maybe even do something cool with it. So I'm certainly on board with that. So let me know. I'm happy to help out.
Okay. So two more questions from me. Of course, this is, I feel like, Jill, you probably you're the better person to answer this to a certain extent. But regarding data policy and how we can utilize the API. Say, for example, we have our own application, and of course, since the API is readily available, I'm assuming any developer could just pull that data and not necessarily modify, but transform it into like any form of visualization on their website or for their own usage, since of course that's the whole initiative of open data. But is there any restriction that will be on the data API?
So some of this will fall under the licensing of this data, which is something that will have to be decided upon, I suppose, by the committee and by policymakers. But you know, we do have data policies, I believe, now that will be a good reference point to help answer some of that. Typically, you know, the data is provided as read only, so you take it and you would manipulate it in your own application and use it there. I'm not the one making that decision, so I can't necessarily speak to it. But if it were up to me, definitely, I think people should be able to do whatever they want with this data and information. There's lots of examples throughout the world where data is sometimes collected and published by the government, but then, you know, the public has free reign on it. And this speaks to the idea that, you know, something like the Open Data Portal is actually providing infrastructure to the country, much in the same way that roads are infrastructure that anyone can use. If you have a truck, you use it in a specific way. If you have a bicycle, or if you're only walking on your feet, you have a different interaction with it, but it provides value. So like the government of the US providing all of the roadways and geographical information for free means that services could be built on top of those. So we all benefit from things like Google Maps on our phones today. We use them daily, but we often don't appreciate the origin story behind that, where what enabled that would not be possible if the government didn't publish data and say to people, hey, you can do what you want with this. So let's think about the impact it's having, and if it's up to me, or if there's the chance to lobby, I would really encourage the government to think very openly about how we approach this.
Okay, thank you, Pawan.
Sure.
And my last question is geared towards I guess again, I feel like this question is more towards data policy, but at the same time, it's more, again, data contribution. Of course, Richard and the OGPMSF spoke about it in our various topics, but when it comes on to your side from developing the application, how easy it is, you would say, to contribute data to this platform, and if it's something that like anyone, not necessarily anyone, but anyone that is authorized could just do it on their own, and then there's the vetting process. Because again, having relevant, up-to-date data is really what will make this platform very, very valuable. And of course, leaving that on the government alone to provide that data, yes, that's okay. But having a community, whether it's the Jamaican developers community, JDTA, or just the general public, to push that data, push the data to the portal, and then the data committee would, revise and so forth. I just want to know what's the process, how easy it is to do that contribution.
Right. So I think for the most part, that's going to be something for the Open Data Committee to decide. I think typically, I don't think we'd want the general public to be pushing data to the portal, because for the most part, the portal represents government data that is then being published to the public. And I'm sure people will grow in their concerns about liabilities, etc., if there is even less control about what's being presented on the portal. But on a technical level, data sets can be created through the API itself. So you can post a data set, you can query a data set, obviously, but you can also just add a data set directly. I think the process is super easy. It doesn't have to be done over API. It can be automated through APIs. So if an agency doesn't have the manpower in-house to give us a file, or give the Open Data Portal a file every week or every month, because their hands are full, we can write some code to help automate that. But it can be as easy as just coming to an agreement, and then handing over files every month. Even if they're not in an open format, we can publish them on the portal, and they'll be useful. They won't be as useful as if they were in a open format, because they'll be less reusable, etc. But certainly in terms of a process, I think that's mainly for us to decide, and we can make it super easy for people so that it's as easy as sending an email. It really doesn't have to be complicated.
Okay, I do agree. I do agree. With that said, I think you said you had 2 more slides and you're going to wrap up. So
yeah,
you can go ahead.
All right, cool. Yeah, just a couple. Let me know if you're seeing a slide that says Build Jamaica.
Yes.
All right, cool. So I already touched on some of this, which is that, you know, data allows for new businesses and business models to thrive. I myself run Farmcredibly. We're a data-driven organization that's using information and data to transform social capital into economic capital. The other thing I'll mention is, unlike the food that's grown on the farms we work with, data is a commodity, unlike cabbage or tomatoes. You know, the more people use cabbage or tomatoes is the less of it you have and less valuable it is, right? You can't sell half a cabbage for as much as you can sell a whole cabbage for. But it's the opposite with data and digital assets like that, where the more it's used is actually the more valuable it is. So the more the map data is used that was published by the U.S. government, is the more valuable it is, until, you know, it's actually worth millions of dollars if you look at the impact it's having economically for Google and for even several private businesses. So that's a big takeaway. But there are also benefits for the government itself. It's not just about benefits to the private sector. It's, you know, for the government, there are so many agencies, especially in Jamaica, and ministries, that sharing information between ministries is a huge bottleneck and headache. I learned about having gone through this process. So it makes things easier to share between government agencies if we're also using this type of system. And generally, there are less calls and emails if to field if you're just putting all the information out there and people can do what they want with it, interpret it as they want, or find what they need. The other great benefit of this is that government learns more about what the public needs and wants. So, you know, the great initiative that Ross spoke of on U-Report speaks directly to this, where we are learning things that weren't apparent before, and because of that, we're able to target, well, specific services can target real needs that we have because of information and data that backs it up. And I think that's extremely powerful. So that's basically it for my slides. My real takeaways or the real things I want to share right now are our next steps. So I'd like to encourage everyone to understand open data and reach out, become a part of this initiative and this movement, and decide what you want from government data. Like I said when we started out, this is about storytelling. So decide what stories you'd like to tell. You know, and by all means participate, and understand that this is an iterative process where we're getting better each time, and you know, it'll take several cycles, but the important thing is to put a process in place, as Shane alluded to earlier, that we can iterate on and continue building this thing out, and really become and continue to be a shining light throughout the Caribbean, because this is really inspiring a lot of other countries to do this. When I did this work for Jamaica, we also set up an open data portal for the government of St. Lucia. They took a lot longer than us to launch, but they were very much inspired by the work we did and continue to do. So, you know, props to everyone here and who's a part of this, and, you know, let's take it to that next level. So thanks.
Thank you, Varun. That was a great presentation. I hope a lot of you found data sets that could probably be useful to you in creating solutions. I like the fact that you showed us the chikungunya diagrams. As you talked about chikungunya, I was being attacked by some mosquitoes on this side.
Oh no.
But it's good to see that we have a framework that can easily be expanded into a regional effort. And so we're looking forward, especially since Mr. Lumsden mentioned not include CARICOM, then it's good to know that we can not not only have this platform that we can easily expand and inspire other Caribbean nations to create same framework, but also that we can be trendsetters within the region. So we're glad that you guys started that. I'm not going to take any additional questions to Shane's questions at this time because we are at 3 p.m. So I'm just going to move right into Reese's presentation, and then we'll take any general questions afterwards. So our next presentation will focus on possible use cases that haven't yet been mentioned for open data in Jamaica. And with us, we have Reese Stewart. He is co-founder of Down and an active spatial data architect. He has a lot of experience with analyzing, identifying, and transforming spatial data into useful information to help not just businesses, but also the open source community to leverage data to make more informed decisions. He has recently demonstrated how spatial data can be extracted and used to help hurricane prediction accuracy analysis using the PRAM stack at the PostGIS Day 2021. So if you look that up, you can find it, but I'll allow Reese to tell you a little bit more about himself. Reese? Is Reese still on call?
Good afternoon.
Awesome.
Sorry,
Good
I
afternoon.
was slightly off my computer. How are you all doing?
We're doing well. We're doing well. You?
Wonderful. Not bad at all. Thank you. So as Latifa had said, I'm Reese, co-founder of Walking Down. I'm going to be demonstrating a small visualization of open data. Let me share my screen.
Okay, so if anyone has any questions filtering in from Varun's presentation, you can drop them in the chat or private. Send me a DM on Zoom and we'll address them at the end of Reese's presentation. Reese?
Alrighty, are you all seeing my screen?
Yes, I'm seeing myself.
All right, are you seeing yourself? Great. All right, so I had gone over gone through the open data portal here. And as was mentioned earlier by Varun, not much has changed or been updated. I recall presenting at an open data day some years ago, and I actually recreated Varun's chikungunya map, just using the data that was there. I looked through the other day for something interesting. This jumped out at me. I was like, all right, cool. We can visualize how gas prices are changing over time. And the first hiccup was that this is actually a textbook price survey. So there are some slight problems with the data, but I'm sure those will be rectified over time. So what I ended up looking at and what jumped out at me as being interesting was this data set from the Jamaica Tourist Board. Where is it? Yeah, visitors by country. So this seemed interesting. It basically gives you the port of entry, the type of visit, I guess wedding, red is wedding, and the country. Sadly, it has Africa as a country, should be a no-no. And then it has the month. It doesn't tell what year this is, so I can't gauge if this is last year or the year before. And then this last column is just the number of people in a given month for a given type of visit at a given airport. As was mentioned earlier, I like to deal with spatial data, and this has no intrinsic spatial coordinates, for example, but we all know where Aruba or Bahamas is, so we can generate a location for them. Sorry. All right, so for step one, we're going to download the data, which I already did. I gather it's not a very technical audience, so I'm going to keep the code to a minimum, and I'm going to increase the point I'm clicking. So I'm using a piece of software called QGIS. It's an analog for what Varun mentioned earlier is called ArcGIS. So with QGIS, which is an open source project, you can query, look at, visualize all manner of spatial data. So I will open the data I downloaded earlier. All right. Varun also mentioned that there are different types of data formats, and JSON and CSV formats are excellent. They're basically plain text, easy to open with almost any kind of editor. And that's what this data is here. This is a CSV file. All right, so I have the data here in my piece of software. And we have this, what is this, 19,000 odd rows. Some rows are less useful. So we're seeing here where there's a grand total. So it looks at this as if this was taken from a summary spreadsheet, for example. Not to be deterred, we shall press forward. I have a database which has country data, so we can visualize the countries. And here we have the entire world. This database is PostgreSQL, not that it really matters. I'm going to now import the text file into the database, and then we can undertake a little bit of spatial analysis, magic stuff. So let's rename this file to just visits. All right, we're good.
It seemed like you were open for no, crashes there. Just saying.
Yeah, there was a small delay. I was wondering what was going on. Alrighty, so as I had mentioned earlier, there is no intrinsic geographical data in this table, but we know where Aruba is, or Africa. Again, I am very disappointed that they have Africa as a country. Should be a
I agree, Reese.
big no-no. But we digress. All right, so we can basically do what's called a join between, for example, the country name here in this table and the country name in this table. I'm going to be using what is called SQL, which is a query language to manipulate the data and explore it. All right, so just, you have a question?
Luis,
Yeah.
is your phone near you by any chance?
I'm
recommending you join by your phone so your voice don't break up, because I think your computer is the application is taking up a lot of your resources, your computer resources. Into the breaking. But otherwise from that you can continue. Hello? All right. Well, Luis is setting up. Luis, are you there?
Yeah, man. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes. Yes. Much better.
Oh, okay. All right. Where was I? I was at. Oh, right. So I was telling you about SQL, and the SQL is a query language that is used to query data in databases. We're gonna try and create a simple map, basically showing the path from each country to Jamaica. So I think step one, with dock you over here. We're gonna just look at the data in the visits table again. All right, so we have that here. And we want to basically join up the table based on the country name. And also, I think a month can be picked up as well. 1 second. All right, back again. So origin, if I recall correctly, is the country name. Yeah. So we'll do origin. Month. And we're gonna summate, that's the word? I'm sorry. Do a summation of the number of visitors.
I think your screen is. Oh, never mind. Never mind. It's well. So while Lisa's typing, I'm just going to explain quickly. So pretty much it's creating a relationship between two tables to make more sense of the data by mapping the visitors with our existing country database. So it's pretty much showing a bit of process of how we can take the data from the open data portal and make like a useful visualization for it, even for ones that hasn't been published or shown on the site, as he mentioned. It's going to show like network mapping from where visitors are coming from to Jamaica.
All right, so here is the first step. I'm just gonna basically get a summary of for each country, the total for a given month. Recall that there were different categories of visits, like weddings, I think funerals or vacation. So we're not really caring about that right now. We just want the total amount of people coming in. So that's just to get a summary. We're gonna then join it to the country table. But before we do that, we're gonna do a little fun stuff here. countries. All right, let's see where we're at now. All right, so nothing extra added on. So let me just get the actual coordinate of the center of each country. All right, so basically this column here has this last column here has the coordinates of each country, or the centroid of the country. Countries are large entities, unless you're Antigua. So, you know, they cover a large space. This is the middle of the country. So if we were to just drop this on the map, it would look like right. So we have some countries here. Let me bring you above. Right, here we go. So all these red dots are countries where visitors come to Jamaica from. For the last time, I like to point out Africa is empty because they put Africa as a country, and that is the last I mentioned that, I promise. Alrighty, so where is I? All right, so now we want the lines. So we know where Jamaica is. Jamaica is roughly at negative 77 degrees longitude, 17 degrees north. So given that we have a point for each other country, and we know where Jamaica is, we can just create a line from Jamaica, which is at negative 77, roughly 17 north, to the other point of the country. Oh, of course, errors are bound to happen. So let's fix that up. Alrighty, so if we're to drop this onto the map, all right, we have lines. We have lines from countries to Jamaica. I have a question for everyone on the call though. Can anyone see anything wrong with this? If anyone has the correct answer, I will buy a pack of National Green Crackers for you with cheese.
I think I'm going to get the answer wrong, but is it because most of the travel is from the east?
No, has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I am not being from Africa.
No,
I'm not mentioning Africa again. I said that.
That's not the issue. Are you talking about the center point for Jamaica?
No. All right, last chance before I give you all the answer. Going once, going twice. Right. This is the ideal scenario for someone who believes the earth is flat. All these lines are straight.
Oh,
The Earth is not flat. Therefore, traveling from Jamaica to somewhere, for example, like Australia, you'll be traveling in a line on the map as a straight. So let us fix that part. In reality, you travel on a great circle arc across, vast distances. So let us get that sorted out. We need to make a small change to our code. Edit SD segmentize. I think that's it.
And I guess this is what you call accurate data representation. All right, that's great, Luis.
as much as possible. Now, of course, I forgot to change this. Let me remove you. Ta-da! Of course, there's some caveats because QGIS can't properly render great circles going across the dateline. Hence, going to, for example, heading over to, where is this? This line here, for example, is going to the Philippines, but it can't accurately represent it in this view here. So it gives you a straight line way across the top of Russia, then back down. But by and large, for the ones that don't cross the date line, these are what the actual, quote unquote, flight path would look like as a great circle, arc. Yeah, so we could get very, very fancy, but given the time constraints, I can't go too much further. I had planned to use the month data and do it, have kind of a traveling map by a month, but that won't happen right now. But yeah, so that's a quick, easy way to visualize some data from the Open Data Portal. Again, as Vern had mentioned earlier, if the data is in an open format, such as JSON or CSV, life will be much easier. And he mentioned PDF, which is not good at all for actual data work. But yeah, any questions?
So I can't think of any question. All right. So it's not necessarily a question though. All right. So is there, all right, apart from this tool, what other tools would you recommend individuals to use for data visualization? For spatial data? And like what on top of that is what are some like this visualization that you've shown, what are possible use cases you think could generate from like something like this? Continue.
All right, so in terms of data visualization on a whole, programs I'm not too sure about. In terms of web frameworks though, there's D3.js, which is very, very fantastic. D3 gives you a bazillion types of graphs and D3.js, let's try to find it out. Gives you, a bazillion different types of visualizations. It's really, really cool. For spatial data, in terms of exploring, like in my experience, in going through data on a whole, you don't first explore it. And spatial data, I think QGIS is the tool of choice if you're looking at an open source product. So usually you would explore data in this first, this can open practically any format. Varun mentioned earlier shape files. You can open shape files, data from databases like PostgreSQL, MySQL, Oracle. The list goes on and on. It's quite a complete suite of formats that this software can open. In terms of showing your data as an end result, usually it'd be on a web page. And again, I'll point you in the direction of D3.js. For map specifically, there is leaflet and our open layers. I use leaflets in my products generally. Actually, the dude that created it is from Ukraine, hence.
Yeah, I remember us working on a project with leaflet.
Yeah. There's also open layers, and more recently, what used to be Mapbox, or what is Mapbox, went closed source, and then there is now an open source fork called LibreMap, I think it is, MapLibre. But these are spatial web frameworks, if you want to like do stuff, like mapping on the web. For general graph and stuff, I recommend D3.js. What was the other part of the question, Oshie?
Before I go to there, let me actually ask another question. Based on the data that you saw, right, and Richard and Gary is on the call as well as Boran, from your aspect as a data architect or spatial data architect, like seeing the data, working with the data, what are some like things you expected from the data, like columns, information? Of course, Africa not being Africa, so you don't have to mention it for you.
Okay.
Africa not as a country, expected coordinates. What else do you expect from like a data that is readily used without much modification for something like what you just did?
All right. So in this example, I would have liked, so it's given the month, right? I would have liked an actual a year with it. And I think most people would like data that is more granular. If you can give me daily arrival statistics, even better. By the hour, even better. People that deal with the data don't usually complain when there is too much of it, right? The opposite. I would expect coordinates here because given our country, we can all find where our country is. So in this particular example, ideally a more granular date. And then, of course, an explanation of what the columns really mean. I mean, I can guess that wed is wedding, bus business, but I don't recall seeing an explanation, where is it, of what each column is about. Am I right or am I wrong? Yeah, I don't see anything that jumps out that says, hey, these columns mean this. Here is a key, for example. So that would also be very useful.
Okay, so therefore we also need to take in consideration data dictionary going forward for the users to know about the columns and so forth. So
yeah, man, definitely. Documentation is not just for code, it's also for actually data itself.
Yes. All right, I think the other question, and I think after this we'll just take 2 questions from the audience if there is any, and then wrap up. The other question is like this data visualization that you generated, like can you off the top of your head any use case you could see for this?
For this in particular?
Well, I mean,
I mean, this is good to just to know. I mean, if you had if for whatever reason the data interests you, I think you can find, it'll be useful to you. I mean, I can't see any, for example, I can't off the top of my head right now think of a way this data could be useful, for example, for an app. I mean, maybe I could say, all right, cool, in March, there's an influx of people from France over the past 5 years. Ergo, let me try and do something to cater to them. That's a possibility. I mean, as with
Okay.
all data, I think if you have an idea for the data, it's useful to you.
Well, I guess off the top of my head, of course tourism. Which month, which days you tend to get more visitors from UK, US, and so forth, and then you probably could tailor that whole tourist experience for those of users, and knowing prioritizing on flights out and in the country, because most likely people will travel. Most people from the US will travel this time versus most people from the UK travel from and that time. Like, I guess from the tourism, and as well as the airplane industry or travel industry, use cases can really just generate a lot of use cases from a visualization from this. So I guess those are what I think top of my head. But apart from that, Richard, Gary, anyone from the audience, do you have any questions regarding like the process or anything?
So just to comment on the same point, one way I've used this data set, for example, is in tailoring a tourist product, like you said. And if Reese was to weight the graph in terms of the counts from each country, you'd see a very thick line, or most of our travel, like 80% of our travelers come from North America, at least from the US and Canada. So if you're building an app and want to tailor it to tourists, that's where most of our tourists are coming from. That's it.
Thank you, Ron. Right. I don't think there's any other question. Latifa, you can go ahead and wrap up. Thank you very much, Luis.
Yeah, man, no problem.
Thanks, Ashane. So thank you again, Reese. We're quite a bit over time, but let's wrap up as soon as possible. We definitely went through a lot today, so I'm sure some persons are probably quiet because they're overwhelmed with the amount of information, but thankfully there is the live stream that you can go through. So in the interest of time, I'm going to wrap up, and then we see where we can push out all the resources that have been shared by all our speakers today to our various social media platforms, so you can have access to all of them. So we would like to thank our entire audience, both on Zoom and on YouTube, for participating in today's event. We definitely hope that you have taken a lot away from these presentations, and that you yourself are thinking of solutions that you could build or contribute to not only increase the amount of open data that's available, but also to capitalize on that data to create other solutions that can contribute to both national and regional development, because at the end of the day, that is the goal. We are making the data available so that it can be used in meaningful ways, as Reese just demonstrated one useful way that we can use open data. And we'd also like to thank our speakers. Much gratitude is extended to Mr. Gary Campbell from the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology, to Mr. Richard Lumsden from the Ministry of Finance, to Ross Shield from UNICEF Jamaica, to Varun Baker from Farm Credibly, and of course, Reese Stewart from Auchindown, for sharing with us their expertise and their experience, and so much information about not only open data and its importance, but also all the different initiatives that are being planned by both government and civil society groups certainly very, very valuable, and we hope that you all make use of their contact information once it is published after this event, and keep involved, because as I said at the start of this event, this not only this event but open data in general is for all persons. We are all stakeholders, even if these initiatives are being carried out by key stakeholders. We are all stakeholders in this process, and so we'd like to ensure that everyone is keeping up to date and that everyone is contributing in some way, not only because we need all of our data, but also because the provision of this data and capitalization of this data is going to benefit all of us in the end. I'd also like to thank our team at Jamaican Developers for their assistance in making this event possible. Of course, you all know Shane Bailey, our co-founder. We also had with us Anastasia Anderson, our research and content curation officer, and Nicholas Key, or another co-founder for the Jamaican Developers community. And of course, um, just like any of our sessions, we have to give a huge, huge shout out to our sponsors, Particular Presence Technologies, Vertis Technology Solutions Limited, and Asub Limited. Follow us on all our social media platforms at JamDevCo. You can also find the live stream of all our recent events on our YouTube channel, Jamaican Developers Community. Like, share, and subscribe. And of course, for those of you who may not be a part of the Jamaican Developers Telegram group, you can message us after this session and we will send you an invite link. And with that, I'd like to ask everyone to continue to be safe on our nation's road, continue to keep safe from COVID, and I hope that you all have a wonderful weekend. Let's close out. With that, we're adjourned. If anyone has any questions, any lingering questions, we'll be on the line for about 5 minutes, for the next 5 minutes, just to address any concerns, anyone who needs a link or needs to contact us. But with that, take care. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Okay, we are going to end. Goodbye, everyone.